Anyway, great to see everybody here, and for our first panel of the day, so many people, which is really exciting. My name is Neil Romanek. I'm the editorial director of The Flint. The Flint is a new publication aimed at sustainability in the media industry. We cover sustainability from script to distribution and across all verticals, which is gaming and film and TV and sports and news. And I have been asked to by KitPlus to moderate these sessions today, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. This is the first time KitPlus has done a conference like this. So as you're listening to the guys here, think of the questions you might want to ask, because we want this to be interactive. If there's anything that any thoughts you guys have or anything you want to ask some of the, I guess I'm going to say, biggest gaming names in Scotland.
Oh yeah, clearly.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, there's some great resources here that you should take advantage of. So can I ask you guys to introduce yourselves before we start? James, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm James. I'm the CEO, founder of Esports Scotland. Esports Scotland is primarily an esports events company. We have IP like the Scottish Esports League. We have other pillars. We work in education, and we also do B2B.
Hi, I'm Justin. I'm co-head of games at Blazing Griffin. Blazing Griffin is a multimedia company where we have a post-production facility. We do film and TV production, but we also have a games department. Some of our games include working with IP. We've recently released 2 games based on Agatha Christie's character Hercule Poirot. We've also worked across the gaming platform ecosystem, across PC, consoles, some work in VR and in AR, where we're just about to launch an AR adaptation of the board game Catan. So we generally have an interest in IP and how that moves across mediums and across devices.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
But can I just point out you missed award-winning?
Award-winning, multiple award-winning.
BAFTA award-winning.
2 BAFTAs, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So, not that I'm doing your job for you. But hi folks, my name's Brian Baglow. I'm the founder and director of the Scottish Games Network and something called Scottish Games Week, which is coming up at the end of the month. If you've any interest in video games, we have events in Edinburgh, Glasgow and Dundee for industry educators and the wider film, screen, television, animation industries. So come and see us.
Great. I really want to play that virtual Catan game. So can you guys hear us okay out there? Okay, great. So one of the things this panel is on esports and gaming in Scotland, and it's kind of, I guess, maybe to people outside those industries, it's like esports, gaming, that's all one thing, right? That's all. But they're actually 2 very, very different things, and they sort of come together in the media industry in different ways. And it would be interesting just to kind of get some clarity about that first. So when we talk about media and media skills going into esports or games, what is the division between those, and kind of talking about esports first?
Well, esports is competitive gaming. And I think it's a $1.5 billion industry. And esports is people playing against each other for prizes. It can be 1v1. You've got like FIFA titles, 1v1 tournaments, all the way up to 5v5. And they play on games like, Blazing Griffin could make. Do you guys make any esports titles yet?
We have made multiplayer, which is an interesting one, but not specifically esports. Yeah.
But I suppose it can be another good revenue stream for games developers if their title becomes an esports title. And you can't really say what is going to become an esports title. It's kind of player led, and what people like. People have tried to make an esports game, but it depends if people pick it up or not.
So it's something. So esports is something for broadcasters, basically. So if I'm a broadcaster, esports is the I guess you could say the area of gaming where I'm gonna make my money from.
I mean, we primarily broadcast on software platforms as Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Gaming. That's primarily where the audience is. But we've actually broadcast 2 seasons of the Scottish Esports League on BBC Sport, so that was quite a big feat for us as well.
And then, if you want to talk as a game developer, so that is, I guess, the skill set that you're going to be accessing there is more animators and designers and...
Yeah, we I suppose our kind of normal team structures that we have designers who it will kind of outline what the game does, and then they'll pass that to our programmers or coders or engineers who will build the game, and then we have our art department, including 3D artists, 2D artists, UI artists, and animators, and that's all kind of managed by production. So we kind of have those four main departments of production, design, code, and art that come together to make things. And as we've just kind of alluded to, we at Blazing Griffin don't have any esports games, and it's interesting that in Scotland, I don't think there is an esports game that is made in Scotland, although
One.
Which one's that?
Axiom Soccer.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But I think, nevertheless, in our makeup, we have a lot of people who came into games because of their interest to esports. So, we've definitely seen in the past few years how esports has broadened mass interest in games as a way to come into games development.
Yeah.
And then, like with Scottish Games Network, are you kind of fielding that whole big, with esports games, people kind of coming into the industry and sort of through those different avenues?
So I think we need to be very careful. We need to make it really clear to our lovely audience that games and esports are parallel, but there's very little crossover, right? And there is a conflation, games and esports, especially when it comes to education. But as James said, esports is playing games competitively or professionally, and then it's event management and broadcast around that, whether it's for streaming platforms or for the more traditional broadcasters. When it comes to the games industry, as we see it, it's all about the design, development, and production of video games, which can be for anything, mobile phones, web browsers, consoles, PCs, whatever it happens to be. But the skills are very, very different. You need the technical and creative people who can do the coding, development, you need producers, and you need art, animation, etc. Now that is starting to change because we're now at the point where we have technologies like virtual production. So that's where the two sectors are kind of starting to cross, because you're getting people who have come through game design development courses who are now moving into film, television, animation, and the like, and taking those skills and experience into the creation of virtual environments and helping everything coming out of the Disney stable these days. But at the moment, games and esports need to be seen as separate disciplines, as it were.
But then also, as that, I guess esports started by people just streaming their games online, or recording their game. I guess first recording their games on YouTube and stuff. So potentially you can build content or broadcast content out of any kind of game, as long as people will watch gameplay. Oh, that's right. So
you can get speedrunning games. Once again, it's about people enjoying, people playing the games at a high level. I think it's really inclusive esports, where you could buy an Xbox, you could play the exact same game as somebody that's winning millions of pounds on the same game, right? I think it's about watching people play at that high skill level. That's why people enjoy watching it.
So we've got a great example here in Scotland. So we have a very small team based in Dundee. They're called Team Terrible. And back over lockdown, they took part in a game jam, a 48-hour games competition, and created a little game just for mobile where you looked after a demonic baby called the Baby in Yellow. And it got such a response at the game jam, they thought, well, we'll top and tail it, we'll stick it out. And they had real jobs. They worked at Rockstar Games. But it made it onto Twitch, and it got picked up by the streamers, the influencers, and it did so well that they've now got a team of 8. They're looking for offices in Dundee, and the game's been downloaded and played 175 million times. I mean, this is what's these are the opportunities, and this is the potential. So just getting picked up. And if you think back in the day, Twitch, before it became Twitch, was just the game stream on Justin.tv.
That's right.
So it was a homegrown thing. And for a lot of people, I'm sure many of our audience, the idea of sitting watching other people play games is mental. I'm 53 years old. I don't understand it, but the audience is out there. And it's completely outside the traditional broadcast sector. So it's something I think everyone in this room needs to be aware of.
Absolutely. So are there any streamers here who are doing their own game streams, or are there designers here or animators? sort of. Does anybody here play any games at all? Okay, good. So we're loosely in the right. Because there is that, I guess maybe getting into more to the broadcast, because there's a lot of broadcast gear and a lot of broadcast equipment, a lot of broadcast professionals here. What is it that why should I, if I'm in esports, go to a broadcaster if I can just do stuff on Twitch and just stream directly to my fans and directly to a select group of people? What is it that broadcast has to offer me?
I mean, you could sit at home, you could get your webcam, you could get your microphone, you could get like a green screen behind you if you wanted, and that could be you. Or you could take it to the next level, and you could have all your guys here from your Blackmagic, your Sonys, and actually go full-scale broadcast with your green screens, your Brompton. So it depends on the scale you want to do it. So yeah, you could do something at a very small level, and your production value would be very small, or you can go full scale. Yeah.
So is that what esports companies, teams, and leagues are looking for when they go to broadcasters? Is that scale, or what is it that broadcasters can give them?
It all depends by the size of the tournament, size of the prize pool, size of the audience. But yeah, I think and even 5G is playing a big part now in esports and broadcast. And I think, yeah, it's just this scalable. It's just so scalable. And I think it's, once again, you got over in Europe, you can fill stadiums. Over here, it's maybe a bit more niche still when it's getting there. But over in Europe, certainly the States and the Far East, you could fill 60,000 stadiums, people watching esports tournaments.
Yeah.
Easy.
I want to give you a chance, Justin, because I've had 2 coffees this morning, so I'm going for it.
I've had 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's Twitch versus broadcast. I think one of the things, and you mentioned, why do people watch games? And I think that there is when you get into it, it is just like any other sport. Why do people watch football? Yep. Almost the benefit of games when it comes to Twitch is that you can watch, Cristiano Ronaldo privately play football, but you also want to watch his team compete. And so that's why I think a lot of these esports tournaments are as massive as they are, because it's not just these individual personalities, it's these big teams that you're following, you're watching every step of the way, going up, and so you want to be there to attend the grand finale, just as much as excitement as any other physical sport, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right, just to touch on that, I think it's a lot more engaging for kids these days, or people that are interested in gaming, where you can go into somewhere like Twitch and they can type in the chat and the person can read the chat and they can engage, right? You can't, unless you're shouting at Cristiano Ronaldo on a football pitch, he's not really going to, I don't think he's going to shout back at you, I don't think.
See, I think this is the thing, and I think this is one of the big misconceptions that broadcasters, television production companies have, is you're not a passive consumer when you're watching something on Twitch. You're taking part, you're in the chat, you're interacting with your friends. It's a far more kind of second screen experience. And so I want to flip that question and say, how do broadcasters tap into games and esports? Because at the moment, they're simply not. And it's not just esports. I would argue that mainstream broadcast television has failed to engage with the games industry in any meaningful way for the last 20 years. Arguably the last decent games show on TV was Games Master on Channel 4 back in the 90s. So what have we had in the last 20 plus years?
Yeah, I think just to follow on that point, I think it's interesting that for the past 10 years, kids have been watching games content on YouTube, not specifically esports, but Minecraft. If you look at Minecraft videos, it's people telling stories inside these worlds. And there's a great virtuous cycle of people playing Minecraft themselves and then going and watch content creators inside that. And that applies to Minecraft, it applies to Roblox as well. But again, I haven't observed much, let's say, mainstream broadcast take-up of that sort of format, but it's an incredibly engaging format where you have personalities just playing these games and showing something fun inside sandboxes.
Mm-hmm. And you do have that, especially with Minecraft or any kind of sandbox game, you have that open-ended creative element where you don't necessarily. It's not going to be we're done in a half hour and then we can put an ad at the end of it. And that advertising model, I think, maybe is one of the, because if you're an esports tournament, you may not be able to have any sense of how long this thing may last. It could be minutes, it could be a couple hours you're looking at. You're not, so how do you fit that into a traditional broadcast?
And I think traditional broadcast,
schedules.
you'll have to go get an idea, take it to the network, pitch it. It could be like a year and a half process to get something, where these guys could be in front of the camera, great audience, guy called Unspeakable, my little girl loves him. He just he's got a big house in LA and he just destroys it, and they play Minecraft all the time, and these guys can jump on something really quick and then engage and put out a new show. So it's quite tricky for broadcast, I'd say.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's just this real opportunity just sort of sitting there for the person who can come along and figure it out.
Let's put it this way. Twitch is the 4th largest traffic generator in the world when it comes to the internet, behind Netflix and Apple and Spotify. It's enormous, and it has tens of millions of fans all over the world, and it's completely removed from every element of the television industry. So again, I think the challenge is, it's not going away. It's only going to keep growing. I think it's up to the TV and broadcast sector to find a way to actually tap into it and make it relevant to them, because opening it out to a more family-friendly audience, teachers, adults, parents, there may be some education to be done there. But I think there's an open door. I think it's going to be up to the TV sector to kind of make the first move.
Justin, when you're designing games, are you now thinking about their streamability or how they might be able to be shared in, even if it's in a stream or YouTube, or how? So
it really depends upon the game, but that is a really important consideration for, I'd say, most game developers and most publishers these days. So also, just to go into the kind of the normal business model here, is that you have games developers who'll make the game, and then you'll have a publisher who will take that game and sell it on digital distribution platforms like Steam, or in the PlayStation Online Store, or retail, which is in shops. Some game developers self-publish as well. They'll just, anyone can upload a game on Steam, and not everyone has the funding or the expertise to market a game and get it seen. So these publishers, whose sole job it is to get games seen, are really nowadays focusing on, when they're choosing which games to fund, which games to take on, is how streamable it is. Because I think that the number of games, you just mentioned one today, that catapult themselves through streamability. You mentioned Baby in Yellow. Yeah. That happened again to Among Us, and I think we all know Among Us now. Yep. Among Us had about a year of release where not many people played it. A few people played it. And then some streamers came to it and started creating content around it, and that snowballed from there, and everyone jumped on. But I find it really interesting that you have like a very long period where not many people played it. So you can see that great games can fly under the radar if they're not picked up. So nowadays, a lot of people are thinking, how can we get streamers to pick up our game? How can we get people to create content inside our game that's different? So a single playthrough game is not going to be super interesting to stream. Also, just from a volume point of view, if you have a streamer who plays it once, they can't play it again. They need to keep their audience involved. So how can you get people to come back again and again to your game? So elements of sandboxness, elements of randomness, achievement hunting. It really depends, though, on the type of game that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this applies to multiplayer games, like Among Us as a multiplayer game. Obviously benefited from that. For us, when we've had single player games which are mystery detective, they don't necessarily lend themselves towards streamability, and you can I think devalue your game if you try and do something, because you're devaluing your core audience who just want to sit down. They're not going to spoil the story and look online. So it doesn't apply to every genre of games, but certainly ones with any sort of multiplayer aspect or any sort of sandbox aspect where you can be building your own things, then anything you can do to get people streaming it is going to be really important for visibility.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up, just for the audience, when it comes to games and it comes to streaming, there are no gatekeepers. You can publish on the App Store for $99. You can publish on Steam for, is it 25? Anybody can do it. So, we don't have the same, constraints on the pipeline. There are 1.27 million apps on the App Store, from the biggest companies in the world down to, like, two guys in the back bedroom in Hilltown in Dundee. And so the amount of content out there is ferocious. So the primary challenge facing developers right now is not making a thing. It's getting that thing into the hands of people who are playing it and finding you that audience.
We're seeing also with esports, and I think this talks about the sort of the bigger gaming world, that there are so many ways into it in terms of careers. There'll be a training and education session later on in the day, which we'll talk about some of this stuff. But there's also like the live show aspect of, so you're designing, you have a game which somebody could be playing by themselves alone and they don't want to talk to anybody all weekend, that then they could also be streaming to their friends. That could also then be an esport that they play against other teams, and then that could be in front of a gigantic live show, an arena where I always think of like the League of Legends, the championships, which are no expense spared in gigantic stadiums with virtual reality and so there's also that live show aspect, and it'd be, I guess, if you want to talk about kind of how those are set up and what the opportunities are there.
Yeah, and I think I'm on LinkedIn a lot more than any other social media site now, and you see a lot of people coming from TV and film into esports, so they're bringing that experience now from that they've had for like 20 plus years. People in Disney coming over, people on Netflix coming over to esports now and bringing that experience. But yeah, you can do anything from, once again, you could be a camera guy on a show, you could be doing sound, you could be doing production design,
you could do pyrotechnics,
pyrotechnics,
commentators,
just absolutely everything. You're just taking what you get from sports and you can transfer it over to esports and some.
That's true, and I think, again, if you extend this forward, we're already starting to see even more crossover with live events, because you're now starting to get games like Fortnite where they're using it almost like a prototype metaverse. So as well as just coming in and playing the game, they're doing album launches, they're doing live concerts. Travis Scott, Lil Nas X have all done concerts. I think it was the Travis Scott one had something like 6.5 million people watching this one live event that was kind of streamed at a point in time. So there's more and more of this where the crossover with things happening in the virtual world versus things happening, live in the stadium. And that's only going to continue. So the opportunities to bring in digital artists, animators, riggers, etc., plus all of your live events and production people, is just going to increase.
So if as we move towards the metaverse, whatever that is, but things become more virtual. There are these virtual worlds we can go into. I mean, is gaming going to be? I mean, game engines are used for every part of production now, certainly in visual effects and motion capture, all kinds of things. But is gaming going to be the sort of the base that all media is built on here eventually?
Ooh, possibly. I think that's one for you, Justin.
It's the metaverse is interesting. I think my opinion is that there isn't a metaverse. People have always created social spaces, physically and digitally, and some of those social spaces are within games and some aren't. And it's hard to, I think just to your point around what might be the foundation of these social spaces, I definitely think it can be games, and it's interesting, the Fortnite model, where they have a game that they've used as a social space, but you also have other social spaces that are purely digital, like VR chat, for example. A lot of commentary around Facebook's, metaverses. Well, actually, VR chat kind of already has that. You can go into a virtual space, you can be with people, and you can do something that you'd like to do. And actually, you could say that Discord is a metaverse, where it's just a series of chat rooms that you can go into. But yeah, I definitely think that some of these games can be. There's probably going to be a lot of money lost because people will be designing games to be a larger platform for other experiences, which devalues that core experience. Ultimately, Fortnite was successful because it was a really compelling battle royale game that people picked up, the streamers started to play, that esports started to come to. So people are already engaging with that. And from there you can create a concert. We've seen other attempts, and Facebook being a large one, with Meta Horizons, where they've tried to say, hey, come to this space, come to this digital space, and nothing happens. So yeah, I definitely think that games are going to continue to be a big part of social spaces, but there might be a few stumbles along the way.
And you can't force it. Like even Fortnite came out I remember playing Fortnite when it first came, and it was a single player game, and I actually thought, this is rubbish.
Yeah.
Like at the time it came out, and then suddenly Epic have said themselves, like, it just got so popular they had to evolve with it, and I think that's maybe a tricky one for developers to keep up with the trends and what they want.
You know, we've seen, so Fortnite is now so successful that they've had to change the model again. So last week, I don't know if you follow the games industry, but there were massive layoffs at Epic, and everyone's like, how come? Because this company's doing incredibly well, and it's because they've swapped to user-generated content. So more and more of the stuff coming in, being played with, being used in Fortnite, is being generated by the players. And Epic have now had to create an economy to reward their players for making the content that other players are going to use.
Yep.
And this is where we're at. Everything's going to keep changing and evolving ever more quickly. And you've got to be able to accommodate that change, that evolution. And on your point, Justin, one of the most popular channels on Twitch, which is, as we've just spent the last half hour telling you, is people playing games, is just chatting, where it's people...
I thought you were going to say hot tubs there, Brian.
I'm not aware of that channel. But yeah, it's just people chatting. So you have to give your audience the ability to use your platform, your content, in the way that they value, not what you think they should be doing.
Yep.
And I think to your original question, the tools, technologies, and techniques from games are already changing the whole of the creative world. Whether it's business models, revenue streams, ways of engaging with the user, I would argue that BBC Question Time, as a very well understood television format, was saved and probably revitalised by the use of Twitter, the Twitter hashtag BBCQT. Because it recontextualised and gave people a reason to watch it, where they could participate with every single other viewer live. Now, to me, that's gamification. So I think the old definitions, that's film, that's television, that's games, that's animation, are all blurring. So the next KitPlus should have not just an esports section, it should have a games section. My own event at the end of October, beginning of November, we've got an event here in Glasgow called More Than Games, that looks at the transformative power of games and the ways that it's changing the screen industry, education, healthcare, etc., etc. So,
and when is that?
That's going to be at the Corinthian Club on the 3rd of November. I have flyers with me. Stop by, pick one up.
Good.
It'll be fabulous.
It's interesting because that that question time hashtag also. A lot of people will just be looking at that on Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's not. It doesn't force people like, you must come over now and watch that. That there are people who'll be on Twitter all day complaining about whatever they're talking about with the hashtag, who will have never seen the program and maybe have never watched it. But there's a whole new kind of interactive space created that's kind of orbiting the main program. It's interesting. So, at the Flint, our main thrust and our concern is sustainability and trying to get the whole media industry and the weight of the media industry to kind of prepare for the changes to come and to lower carbon footprints and to think more sustainably and kind of, in a variety of ways. What about the games industry now? How does the game industry think about sustainability? Does it? What opportunities are there for education, thinking about sustainable...
I think what you said there, it is multifaceted in terms of, our carbon footprint can be fairly low, depending, I suppose, on the exact genre. There are data centers, but when you're talking about a fairly digital industry, there doesn't need to be a lot of manufacturing involved. I do think one of the largest parts of it is just generally part of our digital economy, which involves data centers and telecoms and that chip infrastructure, which is incredibly destructive to our environment, and games continues to demand more and more as every part of our digital economy does. So that's not great. I still think it may be slightly better than some other heavy industries, but it is an interesting one in terms of can we find efficiencies, for example, through cloud streaming, which is a little bit like public transport. Why own your own car if you could go on a bus? And when you have Xbox Game Pass with xCloud, where you can just, with any laptop or device, just log in and stream from there, there are some challenges. For example, you can't mod, you can't own the game, you only subscribe. So it's definitely not the solution. But as you talked about within education, I think games do have the ability to give messages, both from a very strict educational point of view, but also from a narrative point of view. In the same way that film and TV can convey powerful messages about the impending end of the world, games have that ability to.
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say quickly, and we touched on before we spoke, we've got partners now at Deep Green Energy who are taking compute and are making edge data centers and putting these edge servers in swimming pools and using the heat created from that to generate oil, which heats the swimming pool. So there's a lot of companies out there that are definitely helping taking these data centers and reusing the heat for good. So working on it.
I think it's important to say that the games sector does not need the same kind of capital infrastructure that film television does. The film sector in Scotland, screen sector in Scotland has been advocating for a studio for the best part of 20 years. We don't need that. Give us a table, a laptop, decent Wi-Fi and some nice coffee, we're more or less sorted. The coffee should be sustainable and rainforest certified. But as James said, it's as we move towards greener energy, then we can absolutely make use of that. We can make more ethical choices when it comes to things like data centers, edge computing, and as Nathan said, more and more of our content is entirely virtual. So we're eliminating almost all physical components. There will come a time where games can be streamed to any device. You no longer have to go and purchase a console in order to play, The Last of Us or play the next Grand Theft Auto, because everything will be streamed to whatever you have, whether it's a desktop, a laptop, or a mobile device. So we're waiting for the rest of the infrastructure to kind of be there. But as Justin was saying, in terms of education, we're ahead of the game. We can absolutely help the rest of the world make those cleaner, greener choices to give us a more sustainable future.
I always think of gaming or gamers having something kind of particularly to offer sustainability, and that you're sort of you're practicing thinking in complex systems, and that there's in a way the kind of the environmental crisis is like a giant real-time strategy game.
Yeah. and
where you have a number that you want to get lower and lower and lower, and that's your goal for the game, and you're juggling resources, and that there's a type of thinking, a creative thinking, I think that's really useful.
10, 15 years ago, in fact, I could tell 15 plus years ago, the game researcher and designer Jane McGonigal actually wrote an entire book about this and how you can utilize that attention and that engagement for good, for problem solving. So it's something that has been advocated and put forward because, we've seen it in a few areas. If you remember was it the PlayStation 3? You had Folding at Home, which was a protein folding crowdsource piece of software that was very, very difficult for software to do, but humans are quite good at these intuitive leaps. And so it actually helped advance drug discovery by a number of years, just by putting it in the hands of so many players to fiddle with. And I think there's an awful lot more that we could be doing with that. But we need to have games taken seriously, because at the moment, games in Scotland especially, sit incredibly awkwardly. You know, in the rest of the UK, games are a screen industry, right? The BFI, BAFTA, Creative England treat games as a screen industry. In Scotland, we're a creative industry, so we have nothing to do with Screen Scotland. And Screen Scotland, frankly, want nothing to do with us. I think that has to change.
There's BAFTA Scotland, though, and BAFTA's...
It means that we're misaligned. It means that we're not at the table, we're not a part of the conversations in terms of sustainability, in terms of education, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed very quickly. Sorry, that was a mini rant.
No, you're right, Brian. Yeah,
Told you I'd had 2 coffees.
Questions from you guys? I'm gonna have to run back there, so don't be afraid.
Right.
And can you say who you are as well?
I'm Lewis Forfer. I'm from Bailey Gifford. I used to live stream Call of Duty on Twitch TV, and then now I'm managing broadcast for a financial services company. It kind of, for me, that felt like it just kind of fell into place. There wasn't any sort of educational bits to help bridge that kind of gap. I've been to a lot of broadcast industry talks, and they all talk about a skills shortage. I think that with the boom in your guys' industry of people that are live streaming, there's a lot of professionals, but there's a lot of hobbyists now, a lot more than like myself than when I was back doing that. Are you guys aware of any educational institutions or organisations that are helping to bridge that gap for those hobbyists to help them realise a potential career opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we jumped into education about 18 months ago. Our first partnership was with Dundee and Angus College, and we're going to help them with their curriculum. We've done some HND courses, and we've done a foundation degree. We've got some other partners now, City of Glasgow College, we've got University of West of Scotland here, that once again are talking about esports, and I think each education institution is looking at esports in a different way. Some are tapping into the business management, some are tapping into the event management, and some are tapping into the broadcast. So yeah, it's all coming. So you probably just missed the boat about that, but there's certainly, even kids now, we're doing a project with Dundee and Angus where they're using STEM with esports, and you've now got kids maybe 8+ are sitting with Xboxes and getting taught STEM skills at primary school using esports and talking about casting at that level. So yeah, we're getting more normalised and more widespread.
Yeah, from our perspective, we haven't seen many applicants who have. We've hired graduates from game development courses at universities here. We've also hired people who don't have any formal qualifications. What we've seen, I think, from our intake is esports and people who have experience with streaming and Twitch. Those individuals themselves navigating a fairly accessible education landscape around specific online courses, Udemy, from there going into game jams. We've seen people who, because of their interest in in esports, have an interest in level design. One of the things, if you watch a League of Legends game, the commentators will be talking a lot about the skills, the balance, a lot of the stats, and I think that has benefited a lot of people, creating an analytic mindset that combined with general accessibility of games as things that can be messed with, we have seen people on their own navigate that pathway through modding communities, for example, or creating their own mini levels. But obviously the Scottish education ecosystem is incredibly healthy, and that's something that we've benefited from as well.
I would take a quick step back from that and say you're absolutely correct, but at the moment we've still got this misalignment, right? So game design, development, production tends to sit in the School of Computing. It's like esports pulls in a lot of other different schools. You've got business management, you've got event management, television, film production, and again, so I do some lecturing at Napier in Edinburgh, and the School of Computing teaches all the game students, and the School of Arts and Creative Industries produces all of the producers, editors, directors, publishers, screenwriters, etc. There is literally no crossover. And again, I think unless we address that at the root, then we're going to run the risk that we're not using these hobbyists. We're not pulling them through into education and then out into industry, because what the streamers are doing does not match up or does not sort of come into contact with the games courses in any way. So yeah, we've got some great stuff, and the guys from the UWS, one of the very few universities in the whole of the UK that have creative computing. So it's far, far more aligned and inclusive. But we've got some work to do.
And then I'll say at 12:30, there's a session here on training and education, which will also, esports will be part of that as well. We have time for one more question. Yep.
Just going to ask Justin this. I'm Gavin Baxter from UWA. So it was a generalist question, really. I know Brian mentioned that there was only one. Sorry, thanks. One company, I think, in Scotland had released an esports title, games development company. Do you feel, or are you wondering, just your opinion about why the development of an esports title, amongst other companies, are maybe still in its infancy at the moment? And I suppose the dilemma, if you were to say, for example, jump into that from a Blazing Griffin perspective, that you don't alienate your traditional gamer, your traditional audience, target audience. You know, if you jumped in and you thought it wasn't working, or how would you balance that, and how would is that something in the mind of game development companies, or not, maybe?
I think esports for your average game developer can be. Can only ever be a nice to have. I think if you look at the history of any single esports title, it shows you how incredibly difficult it is to replicate. So if you take League of Legends, I think the biggest esports game in the world, or Dota 2, which is next to it. Now, the history of that is that Blizzard created, a company called Blizzard created a real-time strategy game called Warcraft, and it made Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, all about just building little armies and sending them on this campaign. They also provided mod support, and someone created a mod called Defense of the Ancients that was free to anyone who had the game, which allowed characters to competitively battle against each other. And that mod was very popular for a large number of years, and League of Legends recreated that, and also had a long kind of gestation period. And then Dota 2 came along, again inspired by Defense of the Ancients. So for me to recreate that as a games developer is actually impossible, because the games developer, Blizzard, did not design that game. And if you look at PUBG, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, another one, the history of that is that a developer, Bohemian Interactive, created an army simulation game, first-person shooter, Arma, and then Arma 2, and then someone created a mod called, I think it was DayZ, that came first with zombies, and then off of that another mod which created this idea of many people without zombies, and then that guy created PUBG. So again, the developer didn't make it. A modding community, and all of these things are community-driven and iterative. So if I was going to try to make an esports game, I would probably set aside a group of 5 people for 10 years, 15 years, to try and mess around and see what sticks online. So I think that's, in terms of looking at targeting esports, is why targeting esports is really challenging. However, you can target multiplayer games. And again, looking at small, flexible teams that can create something that is immediately compelling, but flexible and able to respond. Mm-hmm. And I think a recent example of this is BattleBit Remastered, a development team of 3 people created something quite simple, which blew up to have more people than Battlefield playing it. It's not something that you can necessarily prepare for, but and also just to drop another nugget, is that Creative Assembly recently sacked 200 people because they cancelled Hyenas, which is a multiplayer game which was inspired by other successful multiplayer titles, and then just threw as many people as possible at it to create a final product which had to sell. And what you want to do as a developer is make sure that it doesn't have to sell. Make sure that you have the ability to sustain it for a very long time, to try and allow it to find its feet. And again, community engagement being a big part of that.
It must be tricky quickly for game developers.
We're going to have to wrap up here, so very quickly.
You don't get a Rocket League 2, right? CSGO 2, CSGO was a game that was about for 20 years. They've just made CSGO 2, so it must be tricky for games developers to maybe say, well, we need to make number 2, right? Well, you can't because everybody's playing number 1 and they love number 1. So how do you monetize number 1? I think that must be quite tricky for games developers as well.
So I think that there's two very quick things here. One is that the guys are absolutely right. It's very, very difficult and extraordinarily expensive to create an online, massively multiplayer game with any reasonable certainty of success. But the other thing is that all of the skills that are required to do that and to run a game successfully, live ops, data analytics, user acquisition, monetization, lifetime value, cost per install, etc., we don't teach anywhere in the UK. We just don't. So that's why you see the huge companies doing it. You know, the one studio we've got in Scotland right now, Build a Rocket Boy, are launching this huge metaverse game everywhere. You're not going to see it here for months because they're off in small Eastern European and emerging markets trying to gauge whether people like it or not. And they've got a huge number of people sitting in their studios all around the world trying to change the game based on these little markets to give themselves the best opportunity of launching in the US, the UK. So it's a huge challenge. And again, it's changing and evolving all the time.
Great. Thank you so much, James, Justin, Brian. Give our guests a hand, and if you'd like to talk to them, you can talk to them after the over there.
And thank you all for coming.
Thanks very much, guys.
And thank you very much, Neil.